welcome to episode 359, the Valentine's Day edition of the DFO Rundown, brought to you by Bet365. Download the app today. Use a promo code NATION to get in on a huge range of markets. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Of course, all the four nations. Rivalry day tomorrow, Finland and Sweden, and then Canada and the U.S. as the nightcap. 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Pacific, 6 Mountain Time. It should be a hell of a game as we, I'm Jason Gregor, and we welcome Frank Seravalli to the pod, joining us from Montreal. Frankie, how you doing?
Good. I knew I always wanted to spend my Valentine's with Tyler and Pat here in Montreal. So happy Valentine's Day to you, Jason Gregor, and greetings from La Cage, right inside Bell Center. Thank you to them for hosting us all week here in Montreal for our shows. It's been a fantastic venue. Right out over my right shoulder here is the entryway. It's the concourse. And right beyond that are the seats, the storied steep seats here at Bell Center. What an environment it's been. And special thank you as well to Bet365 and JP Weisers for their support all week long here, making these shows possible to do them live and in person from Montreal.
Well, and you know what? 2 games. The first one was close. The second one was close for 40 minutes. And then, U.S. took over. Finland's defense core, I think we're all just waiting for it. It's just, you know what? It's unfortunate. It's ravaged by injuries. And I think they were clearly the underdog heading into the tournament. And I think we saw that last night. And now the games, all 4 countries we're probably looking for the most. The rivalry ones come up tomorrow. And I guess let's start with Sweden and Finland, Frank, because of that. Sweden's ability to come back against Canada and garner a point has really made these final 2 games for both teams. You know, like if Canada loses to the U.S., even a victory over Sweden, like they could win both games and still be out of the tournament. Because if Sweden beats Finland and then beats the U.S. and U.S. has nothing to play for, all of a sudden they're in the final.
What did I tell you before the tournament started? It wouldn't shock me at all if Sweden was playing in the championship game. That defense is something to be reckoned with. And after a really sloppy first period where they gave up the first goal in the first minute and struggled to get their bearings against Canada, the way that they were so disciplined in their approach, making Canada pick their way through the neutral zone, it was predictable. It was really the only chance that they had to win the game. And they nearly did. They pushed Canada to OT. Canada coughs up a 3-1 lead. Jordan Binnington certainly leaves a little bit to be desired with a very average performance. And all of a sudden, now the standings are a little bit skewed and interesting. The U.S. gets 3 points for their regulation win over Finland. Then you've got 2 for Canada for the OT win, 1 for Sweden and none for Finland. That there's a whole bunch of different dynamics at play. The only fact, the only hard truth is, if the U.S. beats Canada in regulation on Saturday night in this rivalry game, that they will have clinched a spot in the championship game next Thursday. That's the only thing we know going into Saturday's games.
Yeah, and now let's start with that game, Canada and U.S. And we'll probably have a decision today, I would think, or maybe not. But I think Jon Cooper's got a big decision in goal. Because Jordan Binnington, he played well in overtime, but he's the main reason why they got to overtime. The Kempe goal I don't think is a goal you can allow, in my opinion, in a tournament like that. He had no chance, obviously, on the third goal. But you look at it, I think, Sam Bennett's coming in for sure. They're going to need his physicality. But what do you think they do with
the way that the U.S. played? Are you kidding? Like, there were some thunderous hits against Finland in the first 10 minutes, and then the way that they played and how ferocious they were around the net. They're going to be a lot to handle, even for Canada's defense, which has some size.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think Sam Bennett plays, especially because the fourth line was dashed too. What do you think he does in goal? What would you do?
Well, so I'm glad you phrased it that way because they're 2 different questions. What I think Canada will do is stick with Jordan Binnington. You know, the praise that Jon Cooper had sort of heaped on him after the game, it was very positive. Not only that, but he had hinted before the tournament started that he really would prefer to stick with one guy and ride them all the way through in a short tournament. I was slightly surprised that they went with Binnington out of the chute because I thought Adin Hill might have been a better fit. nonetheless, I understand why Binnington is such an attractive candidate to start. He oozes confidence. That guy, there's like a Mamba mentality about him where he, no matter what the stats say, no matter where he's ranked in the league, no matter what people think of him, he thinks he's the best goalie in the league. And that is incredibly powerful. And if you're Canada, that's what you're looking for. You've got the worst goaltending in the tournament. He turns in an average performance, and yet there's zero question in his mind as to whether or not he can be the best goalie in the game going up against Connor Hellebuck. That's that, plus kind of the fact that all you need if you're Canada is average goaltending. Just give us a chance to win. That's all you're looking for. So they're going to go with Binnington. I think I would switch it up to Adin Hill because I didn't like a couple of the goals. And that said, I think Hill has a chance to be better. But it's also, we're talking on the margins here. It's a coin flip, and we're talking low single digit % changes from one to the other in terms of chance to win. So maybe another reason alone to stick with Binnington.
Yeah, I think they probably will. I would go with Hill, and I would have actually started Hill. So the thing is, like, you lose to the U.S., they're guaranteed in, and now you lose to the U.S. depending on what fashion you lose. Then you go to Hill in a must-win game against Finland, and then you're going to.
But it's against Finland, though.
Yeah, it is. That's fair. That is very fair. You know, Finland is clearly, I think, the fourth team in this tournament. I don't think there's much debate on that. But like, I look at the thing is against the USA, like that's. I'm assuming it's going to be a tight game. There always could be a surprise, but I think it would be tight. And you can't allow a backbreaking, average goal. If they give up a good goal, it's 2-on-1s, breakaways, cross seam pass, whatever. You're like, okay, fine. That's okay. I have no problem with that. But can Binnington not allow the meh goal? And that to me is
but
going to be
Adin Hill, to your point, that's why maybe I can say it now a better way than I did, or more succinct. Adin Hill is just as susceptible to that as Binnington is, right? We just haven't seen it yet because he hasn't been given a chance in this tournament.
Yeah, I just find that Hill's played better recently, right? I know obviously it's not in this tournament, so maybe you can say, hey, what you did in the NHL doesn't matter, but I'd like to think it matters somewhat, right? So we'll see. I think for Canada though, like I hate when teams have a 2-goal lead and sit back. And I don't think Canada attacked nearly as much as they should have in the third period.
I don't know. They still were able to get chances off the rush. But that's it. They had very little sustained offensive zone time, I felt like.
There was a lot of one and dones.
Yep. But some of those one and dones were really dangerous. And how many chances did McKinnon have to score an OT before Mitch Marner ended it? I think the bigger question for Canada is, so you put Travis Sanheim in, where do you play him? Like for me, I put him right in Shea Theodore's spot, and I put him with Drew Doughty. But what would you do?
Oh, yeah, I think for sure that's what they're going to do. I wouldn't I was looking at Sanheim's numbers across the board. So, you look at it from an offensive perspective. Theodore had 6 more even strength points this year, but he plays on the third best 5-on-5 scoring team in the league, whereas Philly's 19th. And as a defenseman, you know what? You'll get a few more assists when you have a high scoring offense. That's just simple. Their skating speed, actually, the top end speed of Theodore is slightly higher, but Sanheim has way more bursts of 20 miles an hour. So you can argue that, he uses his speed more frequently. So I don't think it's going to be a massive blow. And I really like Shea Theodore. And I
think it's a pretty significant change. I really do.
You think there's that much of a gap between the two of them?
Yes, I do. I think Shea Theodore is a top.
I like Theodore.
I'm trying to think, probably top 12 defenseman in the league.
I think Sanheim's team isn't great around him, right? I like Theodore a lot though. And it's a crappy injury because I'm not going to say it's a nothing play, but it didn't look like it was just like this ferocious, right. He went in awkward, unfortunately. And
I think the other part of this though, this is why you brought Sanheim here. It's not just because the drop off in your view isn't very big. It's because he had versatility. He could play on any of those pairs, but beyond that, he can play on either side, which is you lose a righty, you lose a lefty. It doesn't matter. He can fill in that spot and it's totally fine. So that part is huge. So he steps in. I'm curious to see the U.S. They obviously get the win. They don't make any changes, right? But the way that they got off to a slow start against Finland, maybe in a short tournament as you're looking for chemistry is a question. But how did you feel about the way the U.S. waded into that game?
Well, their power play, I thought, kind of killed the momentum early. It didn't do much on that first power play. It's the exact opposite of Canada. Canada's
they had
power
two
play
offsides on that play.
Like they just looked out of sorts, and you know what? Like, I hate to say it, but they could get away with it. And then you know what? They found their stride. Coach changed the lines, put the Tkachuks together with Eichel. And
why weren't they together from the start? I know you can always go to it. It's like, think about it from, you're in Edmonton. Think about it from an Edmonton perspective. You can always go to Draisaitl and McDavid, but if you could find something else first, maybe more beneficial. Is that maybe their thought process? Well,
I looked at how they constructed their lines, and I think they thought that their third line would be more abrasive, which it was, right? Like Brady Tkachuk was an absolute train wreck in that game in a positive way. Like he was hitting everything, scored 2 goals. Like he's an emotional guy, and I wasn't surprised actually at all that he stepped up his game. I think
Isn't that such a good feeling if you're the Ottawa Senators?
I was just going to say, man, Ottawa, like not only Ottawa, like you look at their young guys getting opportunities here, even their young Finnish defenseman who's not there. Like, you know what? He was pretty competitive last night. Like he's playing against the best players in the world and not, getting completely overwhelmed. But it's more so for Tkachuk and even Sanderson, even though he hasn't played. Him just being around that atmosphere, I think you learn stuff. You talk to Adam Fox and, you talk to Werenski in practice and you see what they do. I think Ottawa, of all the teams in the playoff race, they're 2 key young guys that, they should come out of this tournament, regardless of the outcome, feeling better about themselves and probably being able to take some of what they learn from other players and bring it into Ottawa's room.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to make me sound like a smartass when I say it. This isn't the point, but that's the biggest game Brady Tkachuk's ever played in his life. Last night is the most meaningful game. Hasn't had very many of those in Ottawa. No. And then you take now Saturday, which he already proclaimed as the biggest game of his life against Canada. It's just another level. And not that we didn't know this, but we already were aware that Brady Tkachuk is one of the ultimate competitors. But to get a chance to be in that environment, to your point, I think not just hugely beneficial, but also for the Sens to know when we get in, this guy's going to be a handful to deal with. That's the stuff that leaves you drooling if you're a GM saying, okay, if I could just find a way to add the right piece or two at this deadline and ensure that we get a taste of the playoffs. Not to say the Sens are going to go on a deep run, but can you make for an interesting month in Ottawa? Can you get that taste of playoff experience for everyone? And by the way, send a message to the rest of the league. This is a place you want to be and want to play because we've got more players like him on the way that can help put this team over the top. Come be part of our solution. It's almost like a sales pitch without having to say anything at all.
Do you think Team USA, did they got to play Tkachuk more? He played 13 and a half minutes, had 8 hits and 5 shots and 2 goals, right? But you look at, how many minutes a lot of the other guys played. Do you think we see him more? Does he got to see the ice more?
I always wrestle with this because as a coach, your job is to get the most out of your players in the most efficient way possible. It's hard to think of a more impactful 13 or 14 minutes than that. 8 hits and 2 goals. Isn't that the name of the game?
No, it is 100%.
At some point, is there diminishing return where you ask him to do too much? No one can possibly keep going at that rate forever. Those are 13 really taxing minutes.
Yeah, maybe. I don't
know. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'd like to see Brady Tkachuk more. Those guys wreaked havoc, but there's probably a fair balance to strike.
What do you make? Like USA really kind of dominated that game against Finland as expected. Is there any negative in that now I know that the players right from the end of the game are like, the Tkachuk brothers, man, Matthew Tkachuk, I've been thinking about this game for 9 years. We'll be ready. Like they've got a little bit.
I just know for a fact, by the way, that Brady and Matthew Tkachuk, they, since being here in Montreal, have watched the movie Miracle multiple times. I did a story with Mike Eruzione, and he said that the Tkachuk brothers, who he knows obviously with their Boston roots, and Brady having gone to BU, he said that they've been texting him saying that that's all they've been watching since they got here.
Yeah. And well, it does seem like, and I get it, because the U.S. right now is still the little brother in the relationship between Canada, right? They haven't knocked them off. And so until you do it, this group anyway feels like, hey, we got something to prove. And there's nothing wrong with having a goal that the Canadians, and I think the Canadians respect the Americans, or at least I would hope they would.
It's been since their dad has done it that anyone's done it. 1996 World Cup of Hockey. Like I don't want to hear any more about silver medals. Salt Lake and Vancouver at the time felt like accomplishments for American hockey. That's not, the bar is different now. And to your point, you've got to slay the 800-pound gorilla.
Yeah, they didn't even get a medal in 2014. They got spanked by Finland in the bronze medal.
Last night was their first win in 6 tries in best on best play.
Against Finland?
In total. They went 0-3 at
right.
the World Cup of Hockey and did not finish well in Sochi.
Yeah, so... The Sam Bennett factor for Canada, because if I look at Sam Bennett and players talk about
is he really going to be a factor? Like I'm not saying
I think it's 10 and 11 minutes he will be, because you have to have some players, and hey, Brad Marchand, they got a lot of guys that aren't shrinking violence. Braden Point was like Nathan McKinnon. You're not going to run over Crosby or McDavid. I get it all, but you know what? I think they need a little pop, and the thing that Bennett will bring is, as he won a cup, him and Tkachuk, their teammate. He's one of those guys, Frank, that would not have an issue, right? Like running over Matthew Tkachuk, right? And I just think Canada needs that a little bit in this game tomorrow night.
So here's another question. And the Tkachuks address this, and I do think we should just talk about it briefly, because I've had some really interesting interactions with people, both in conversation and in text. But the U.S. gets booed last night in Bell Center. And look, I was sitting in the press box. I heard it. A lot of people didn't on TV. Not a conspiracy theorist, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if they tried to drown that out with some crowd noise. But the boos were definitely there. Matthew Tkachuk said he didn't like it. I think we can all agree that booing the national anthem isn't in great taste, but I also completely understand it from a Canadian's perspective. The incendiary commentary from Donald Trump has been way too much, and as an American, I don't like it or appreciate it. But what do you make of the environment here and all that's playing out? Like, this is a game, but on a way lesser level, kind of like the Miracle on Ice, there's a backdrop to this game that isn't just a game, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Now we're going to get your mic changed out. Maybe it's cracking a bit. But when I look at this scenario, you're right. It's not to the level of the Cold War by any stretch of the imagination, but it's something that's come out of nowhere that is completely, it's gross, to be honest. When you look at other neighboring countries over the years, and they've been two pretty good neighbors, you make up some BS false accusations, which sadly, that's his MO. He's one of the best storytellers and fabricators ever, sadly. But I think, Frank, it's going to be hotly intense in there. I don't think there's any doubt about it. And people can get upset that there's booing. First of all, it's booing at a sports event, for God's sakes. Like, it's booing. Now, you know what? Maybe don't boo the anthem. I can live with that. But I can understand how some people are mad about it. But during the game, boo all you want. I hope it's intense and loud. Like, it's sports. You can boo the other team, for God's sakes, during the game.
Austin Matthews getting booed because he's the captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs and the captain of Team USA.
Yes.
Expected.
Yes, it should happen, right? If you want to save it, excluding the anthem, I'm like, don't do it at the anthem, fine. Everything else, I hope it's loud. You should have home ice advantage, because if you get to the final next Thursday in Boston, I would assume the American fans are going to be pro-USA, as they should be, and they're going to be booing Canada as well.
Reciprocate booing during the Canadian anthem, because
and even, I guess, where do I come out on the anthem? I'm probably one who could do without the anthem before games, my own humble opinion. So I don't know if we need it, if it's that important as people think, right? Like, where else do we play the national anthem? Why do we got to play it at a sport event, right? Like, especially when you play teams made up of, like, I guess I get it in the Olympics and even in the World Cup because it is your country. But when we talk in regular season games, when you have the Philadelphia Flyers and you've got a bunch of Czechs and Finns and Soviets and Russians and everybody else, and, I get you're playing in that city, but I'm one who could do without the anthem before sporting events. I don't think it has nearly the interest level, at least for me anymore. I've never really loved it. I've always kind of been, well, why do they play it? I don't really know, but they just do.
There's something electric about it, though. Depending on the moment, the game.
Well, if you played the hometown one, Frank, I could understand it. Like if you're the home team.
Okay, but so just because you're in Edmonton, we'll use the Edmonton example. When the crowd sings "Oh Canada" before a playoff game, it's as good as it gets.
That's what I said. If you want to play the home team French, sure. Yeah. I guess I don't need how about this? I don't need the road team anthem. And I know it only happens when it's.
But this is a little different though, because it's also international play. Like this is the hockey version this is the NHL version of the Olympics.
Yeah. Well, you can play the anthem
comparison. I guess here's my point. I brought this up because I got a few messages from people after I tweeted that there were boos during the anthem that said, "You're just trying to make Canadians look bad." And it was like, no, I'm just reporting facts. Like that's what happened here. And to present it as anything otherwise, to say, and then I was getting tweets from people saying, "Oh, I was at the game and people weren't booing." Like, I guess part of my issue is we've reached this point in 2025 in society where you report something that happened and it's like, there's an alternate universe to everything. Nothing can be accepted as, hey, that's what really happened. Yeah, was every person in Bell Center booing? No. Were some? Yes. Could you hear it? Yes. Was it obvious what they were booing? Yes. It's an interesting time. That's all I'll say. And I think it just adds another layer to Saturday's game that if we're lucky enough to get that game twice in the next calendar week, and to do it on both sides of the border, it takes the level of intensity just up 3 notches.
I can tell you, Frank, I like a good, healthy rivalry, Canada-US. It's always been a good rivalry, be kind of fun. This is the first time in my life where I'm like, I really hope, I can't stand the leader of the United States and what he represents as a human being. And that makes me, I hope Canada kicks the shit out of them, to be bluntly honest. Not because it has nothing to do with the players. And I've never felt that way before, but it's the first time. It's beyond disrespectful to claim, like, you're so moronic that you think you could put one country as a state and people, oh yeah, one state. Like, they're so stupid to even talk about it. But anyway, we'll move on. It's irritating me more.
Point saying how incendiary and nonsensical it was.
And it's just,
any American that knows anything about history knows that Canada has had our backs in the darkest, worst moments of our country's history. They've been our greatest friend and ally, which I think is why being an American, being in the building and hearing that hurts. But I also understand why, because of the things that we just talked about and what's been said, why it happens.
Yeah. No, and hey, would I boo the anthem? I wouldn't. But I can see, like, I have a real disdain, not for the average, like, you're an American. I have no disdain for you personally, but for the clown show running it right now. It's and then sadly I see what he does to their education system and everything else, and I feel sorry for people. I saw a report from, anyway, we won't get into politics.
Oh, yeah, let's park it there.
Now, quickly to Sweden and Finland. And Sweden, you talked about it. Like, that point is huge for them, because even if Canada beats Finland, and Sweden, like, it wouldn't be a shock to me that Sweden beat the US on Monday, regardless of what happens with Canada and US. So Sweden comes in, if they take care of Finland, then you come into a situation where if Canada loses or the US loses, right? Like, USA would then have to beat Sweden to get in, and Canada would have to beat Finland, and then hope that it'd be funny. You'd go from cheering against the USA to then cheering for them to get to the final. Like, it's going to be a crazy.
It's a massive point lost for Canada, having a 3-1 lead and not being able to close it out in regulation. This 3-2-1 format changes everything. So two questions. One, I've been advocating for a 3-2-1-0 format in the NHL forever. But I understand why they don't do it, because it skews the standings and makes a lot of teams appear to be very far out of it, even if you can gain more ground more quickly. And two, would you go with 10-minute 3-on-3 OT?
I wouldn't do the 3-2-1 because I went through it last year. The same 16 teams would be in. You just have a bigger gap separation in points, not only for the teams trying to make the playoffs, but you'd have a bigger gap in races in the seeding, which I think makes it more. And really, the best teams are still going to be the best teams over 82 games. I love in a smaller format. I think 3-2-1 makes more sense. I don't like it in 82 games. As for overtime, I've been advocating for longer overtimes for a long time. Heck, if you don't want to go 10 minutes like McDavid wanted it, McKinnon didn't want it. Now, keep in mind, the pace of an NHL regular season game is not going to be the pace of a Sweden.
By the way, McKinnon was joking. There was people tweeted that.
Oh, was he? Okay.
He was saying it in jest, and he was saying it because he was gassed. But then, dude, get off the ice. He was out there forever, and he had 4 point-blank chances and shots on goal. I bet you he would have had a different answer had he scored on one of those.
Yeah, but I think 10 minutes, I like it because, A, it's exciting. It's 3-on-3. But can I put a caveat in? I also want to implement no over and back because I can't stand it. But even if they go to 8 minutes, Frank, or 7, just something, I think it's
if
better.
They go no over and back, Canada doesn't score that goal to win.
Yeah, that's fine.
Because Sid dropped it out to the neutral zone.
Yeah. I don't care about that. It's, to me, I just overall, look at the first minute and 10 seconds, Frank. Nothing happened. All they did was circle around both teams. And it happens too often in the regular season, to me, where you've got nothing going on. It's just, if you want 3-on-3, let's just make it as exciting as possible.
So 8 minutes, according to expected goals, would get you an 86% chance that the game ends in OT. 9 minutes gets you to 93. 10 minutes is close to 96%. You'd have a game ending without a shootout.
Well, hey, let's do it, man. Right?
I'm all for it. That's why, and I don't really care what the toll is on players. Even if you go to OT 20 times a year, what you're talking about is potentially 100 extra minutes of ice time. And yeah, it's taxing ice time. But as a coach, that means you got to use more players. Your philosophy, your strategy has to be different. And that alone, using players further down the lineup, could produce more goals in and of itself and end games faster.
100%. Yeah. And so players, in theory, Frank, because right now most teams use 2 sets of forwards, maybe 3. And that's really about it. And, sometimes 2 defensemen, maybe a third, depending on your team. So this just gets more of your bench engaged. I'd be all for it. 100%. And I bet you if you did a poll, there's very few times, Frank, we can do polls in sports where you're going to get vast majority or almost everybody agreeing. I don't know many fans would be like, no, I want more shootouts. Right. I just don't.
But here's the thing. That's not what's at stake in the poll. The poll really needs to be of NHL players because they're the ones that would have to agree to the change. And that's if McKinnon has even kernels of truth in that, maybe there's other people like him that feel like, hey, we don't want this. So,
yeah.
By the way, absolute sick joke that Canada can go Makar, McKinnon, and McDavid. And then, by the way, the next guy out the door is Crosby.
Yeah, what do you make of Crosby's game?
Joke. Crosby was incredible. We've anointed Connor McDavid as the best player in the world, and he's held that mantle for a long time now, 5-6 years. Crosby is a reminder that, man, he ain't far off still. And 2, we talked about how the Sens must be feeling with Brady Tkachuk in the playoffs. What do you think the Pittsburgh Penguins are feeling like watching Sid dominate again? If we just surrounded this guy with better talent, had made better decisions, why wouldn't we be in the same spot as the Washington Capitals right now?
Yeah. And what do you
Sidney
think?
Crosby has been failed by 2 different regimes. Maybe even 3 if you want to stretch back into the last few decisions of the Jim Rutherford tenure, but it delivered 2 cups, so you deal with it. But that's the biggest thing that stands out for me is Sid has been wronged we should still be seeing Sid in the Stanley Cup playoffs.
Well, I said this, and I wonder, Frank, Sidney Crosby getting back in these type of meaningful games, and does his mindset change at all to think, you know what? Maybe I don't want to go through continue to be in a rebuild as much as I love Pittsburgh. I just wonder. I think better for the Penguins because he could get some stuff for the future. Because let's be honest, they're going to go through hell here soon. It's just a matter of when. And maybe he doesn't want to do it.
Hell. Look at where they are in the standings, and look at how like they're here now, and that's with these guys.
But hell, Frank, is like 5 years of it. And you and I, I've researched the rebuilds, man. Like they are not quick. Chicago's another reminder. Buffalo is the ultimate reminder. So I think, Crosby's great. Now, it's one game. It was awesome. Great game. Lots of guys can have one great games. I do think McDavid, McKinnon overall are at a higher level today. In Sid's prime, different story. And I'm curious to see, like I look at McDavid's line, I thought had a great first period. They didn't do as much as the game went on. They're going to need more from that line 5-on-5 against the USA.
All right, boys, let's get rolling with a new edition of Buy or Sell, brought to you by our friends at Bet365. Download the app today. Use the promo code NATION, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365. Watching these first couple of games, you're getting to see some guys in a best-on-best scenario. I'm curious, is there any player whose stock you want to buy on through 2 games in the tournament? For me, I was really impressed with a guy like Rickard Rakell on Team Sweden. I thought he had a great game playing with like some high-end players. But Frank, I'll let you go first. Any player whose stock you want to buy on through the first 2 games?
Yeah, we talked about him as an X factor before the tournament began for Team Sweden. But how about Adrian Kempe? I don't know that he gets nearly enough love. His game with the LA Kings is special, and he's a guy who can be a real difference maker. So would love to see more of that for him from Team Sweden. And that would be one guy I would look at. I mean, you've got tons of options here too. I mean, you could go team by team and pick a guy that you want to buy stock on, but another guy I would buy stock on from Team Canada, he did score a goal. Cats were getting along with dogs with Canadiens fans in Montreal here cheering on Brad Marchand, but Marchand he's been a great international player and a true thorn in the side that I think would be a really interesting matchup between him and some of the Americans on Saturday night. He's going to be in everyone's face.
If any of those whispers are remotely true about Marchand and Boston, I think there'd be lots of teams that would pay attention. Rickard Rakell's another guy. I know we talked about him a lot, and he's not going anywhere, but if I'm Steve Staios, I'm sitting back and I'm just smiling ear to ear. An organization that has had, like, they got really, like Claude Giroux's obviously in the room and got some experience, but that's really about it. I think sometimes you need one of your young guys to experience it himself. And I think Brady Tkachuk in one game came in, he controlled his emotion. He played perfectly right on the edge without going over. And I think that's a key skill to learn. And Marchand's done it for years, Frank, as you attested to be that pest and jerk and physical and run guys, but do it within the boundaries is so crucial. And I know it's only one game, but through 2 games, I'd be buying on Brady.
So buying on Brady, like, is that a Captain Obvious moment? Or
I don't know. He was great. And I don't know, that duo with the 2 of them, I just think that could be a real problem for Team Canada. I don't know if you guys will maybe have an answer for this one, but anyone whose stock you're selling on through the first 2 games, Greg's?
That's a tough question. It's one game. I try not to get too negative on guys in one game. I didn't see anybody that was like, oh my God, they had a brutal game. I guess
I'll give you one.
Who?
I wasn't that wild about Drew Doughty's game 1. The gap on the Kempe goal was not good. He wasn't super active in the offensive end. And he had the lowest ice time of any Canadian D. Not shocking since his partner left the game and they had to readjust things, but thrown in there, has only played, I think, 6 games since coming back from that injury. Maybe some of that's to be expected to get back to this level, but I didn't love it in game 1.
I would say I didn't love now the chemistry more so from McDavid's wingers. So you know what? It's a super short tournament, but I know Mitch Marner scored in overtime, but he hadn't really done much until then. And Reinhart. So I would say if I was wanting to see more, it would be the wingers on McDavid's line.
Oh, let me throw one more at you too. You know who was super quiet last night was Mikko Rantanen.
Yeah. Yeah, you barely noticed him, honestly.
Yeah, I know you guys talked about that game a little bit, but in the second period there, Finland had the breakaway and then they had two 2-on-1s. Like if they bury one of those, USA probably comes back and has the onslaught anyways, but that game could have been a lot different about halfway through.
I thought Erik Haula had the whole glove side up high wide open and he shot blocker. Easy for me to say from sitting in on the couch, but on the replay, I was like, geez, it looked like the glove side was open.
By the way, we also mentioned him if we were talking about buying, we mentioned him the other night and how well he played, but Erik Karlsson somehow turned it back to Ottawa Senators version Erik Karlsson for one game. Where'd that come from?
Yeah, that's fair. All right, I know you guys are going to get into some trade talk here in the last few minutes of the podcast, so let me set the mood a little bit in the flavor of Valentine's Day. But Frank, you have your deadline matchmaker article coming out, which is always one of my favorite of the year. Don't need to spoil the whole thing. People can read it at dailyfaceoff.com. But give me one match that you've made that you're buying the hardest on, that you want to see the most. And Greg's, I'll ask you to give me a player out there who you'd love to see end up in a certain spot.
Match that I'm buying on the most? I'm going to say Brock Nelson and the Winnipeg Jets. He's been so connected to Minnesota that I think people think it's a foregone conclusion that he's going there. And I just don't think that's the case. The Jets have been interested in Scott Laughton. I just don't think he gets to a high enough ceiling to compare him to Brock Nelson. They need a 2C, not a 3C. They've got the best 3C in the league in Adam Lowry. So if they're going to aim higher, I'd love to see them go after Brock Nelson. And the hard part for Winnipeg hasn't been trading for guys. They've been able to do that no problem. The hard part has been keeping guys and getting them to re-sign. The Jets have $42 million in cap space this summer. They've got decisions to make on Nick Ehlers. They need to figure out whether or not they're not whether or not, but how much the extension is going to cost for Kyle Connor. They've probably got some additions to make on defense. But one thing I'll point out, yes, Brock Nelson is American, but War Road, Minnesota is closer to Winnipeg than it is to St. Paul where the Wild play. So, he's sort of right in that same region, a team equally competitive. The Jets probably have a better chance to win. I'd love to see the Jets aim a little higher than Scott Laughton to get that 2C that they really need.
Oh, yeah. Right. I don't view Laughton as a 2C. I don't want to go with, because I think there's some guys down the line, and Frank and I will talk about, but this is maybe more wishful thinking, because I like to see guys on teams. I think Boston's in somewhat of a retooling phase. So I'm going to say Brad Marchand, and I think he's going to end up in Colorado.
I have a hard time believing they move him.
Yeah, I was going to say, should we make a bet? Like, I'm willing to make another Barry Bonds earring bet kind of thing here.
Oh, hey, the odds are extremely low. I agree. But he is a UFA, guys. He's 36. Like, when he looks at the tea leaves in Boston, I know he's been there the whole time. I get that. But when guys get back in and all of a sudden they're like, geez, man, I want a chance to win again. I just wonder if that does outweigh it for some guys.
If I'm him, I'm saying make a couple quick moves and we'll have a chance to do it again in Boston. Like, this team is a couple seasons removed from the best regular season team in NHL history.
Yeah, they got no centers, buddy.
Okay, but I'm not saying that's easy to find, but Marchand hasn't shown any sign of slowing down. He looks fantastic in this tournament. He looks even better after having 3 surgeries last summer. I'm not moving him. He's part of the fabric of my team, and he's a really good player still and still really productive. So I'm re-signing him. He's going to give us the hometown discount only to a certain extent. And if you're going to play the matchmaker game, like, you got to, I feel like you have to match with guys that could actually move.
Anyone else? Was there a second one you were considering, Greg's?
Well, I've talked about it all year long. It's the easy, lame one, but Edmonton desperately needs a big right shot center. And I've said Michael McCarron from Nashville from the start of the season made sense. He's $900K. He's got another year left on his contract. It's not a big name. It's not sexy, but it's a big need in Edmonton.
Yeah, I think that's a decent one. Would be a nice little low risk ad. All right, that is a wrap on this week's edition of Buy or Sell, brought to you by our friends at Bet365.
Now, when you talk about realistic chance, it comes down to the New York Islanders, and I don't know if anybody knows what Lou Lamoriello is thinking, Frank. So we can get in.
My rule. We can get only God and Lou know. That's the slogan.
So we get into your annual matchmaker that you do on Valentine's Day, and you try to match out some teams. There's exactly 3 weeks today till the NHL trade deadline. The NHL will resume next Saturday. So there's really 13 nights of hockey to be played for teams to figure out what they want. If not, now teams, there is no trade freeze. We could have a trade, but I get why the cap space. Why would you have a guy on your roster? I guess unless you wanted to practice for a few days starting next Tuesday. But you mentioned Scott Laughton, and it's I think Scott Laughton's a really good, he'd be an excellent third line player. I don't view him as a second line center on a cup contending team, but we've heard his name, Frank. Last year he was on your trade on your trade targets board for months. He's there again. You mentioned the Jets should go higher in Nelson, and I would agree. You have him in Washington. Why do you see that as a good fit?
Well, first off, I'm pretty certain Washington's going to do something. They have a 10-point edge in their division, and they have been looking for a third line center. They traded for Lars Eller, which gives you an indication that they knew it was a need. I don't think Lars Eller has been it. I think he's not just lost one step. I think he's lost two. And the reason why I like Laughton is because, if you're the Flyers, you probably have to hold your nose to trade him to another team in your division. But they've got picks. Their system's brimming with prospects. And I think because he's not a rental, you don't feel like you're giving up a crazy amount to fill a need that you have that's going to help you next year as well. And Laughton at $3 million next year is an ideal salary cap addition. And if I'm the Flyers, I'm actually asking Washington for their 2026 first round pick. The Flyers already have three. Draft. Well, it's not just because it's a better draft, but the Flyers already have 3 first round picks this year. Yeah. So if you want to get a fourth, fill your boots, I guess. But if you want to do it in a draft that's a relative down year compared to others, I don't know how much that makes sense. So I'd ask for one for 2026. And if I'm Washington, okay, I get to retain my pick this year. And I get 2 years of Scott Laughton, or a year and a half, I should say. And he's only 30. So if you wanted, you could also re-sign him and keep him. But on the other end of that, if you're the Flyers, you've got some real optionality now. You've got 5 first-round picks in the next 2 drafts. You can pick if you want to, but you could offload a few of them if you want in a package to go get a true difference maker. So I'm led to believe that the first team that puts a first-round pick on the table for Scott Laughton, that he's moving. I think one team, the Winnipeg Jets, has already put a second-round pick on the table. But for the Flyers, with him being a non-rental, I think it makes sense to wait and see what you can get.
People can read the article at dailyfaceoff.com. A few other names. You have Kyle Palmieri. You have up there. You have him connected to the New Jersey Devils. You have Jake Evans with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, Jake Evans is a fascinating one because, early on he was on fire offensively, right? He was having a career year, I'm going to cash in. And, there's lots of talk of maybe he'll re-sign in Montreal or not. Do you have any insight into think that maybe that's less likely and that's why the Habs would be willing to move him?
Yeah, I think the conversation to this point in negotiations has been slow going. I think they've reached a level where I think the Canadians are a bit pessimistic as to whether or not they can get a deal done. And it's more likely that Jake Evans moves than not. That said, I think he's a good fit for Toronto because I'm listening to what Brad Treliving is saying. He wants someone that's defensively responsible, that can play at both ends of the ice. Yeah. Evans is he's still on track for a career year. He can give you 15 goals. And And he's played on the trust line, the identity line, the shutdown line for the Montreal Canadiens and Marty St. Louis. So that line was at the very core and root of their success when they had their winning streak that propped them up in the standings and made them play some meaningful games. And he's also on the younger end of just getting to UFA, and he's a Toronto kid. So I think a lot of the dots are connected. Like, could you see them buy super low on Yanni Gourde? I guess. Are there other centers that maybe fit for Toronto that are higher end? Sure. But I think with the role specifically that you're looking to fill and the stylistic fit, I think Evans is a pretty good one for Toronto.
Now, the one guy who wasn't on your matchmaker board, and you also had, we'll get to him next. I do want to get to the Dallas Stars. You have Rasmus Ristolainen, and you have a pretty big piece going the other way. So what made you choose Ristolainen? Did you not like Seth Jones? Everybody knows he wants to go there. Is it just cost too much, or he's too expensive? You don't think Dallas wants to do it?
Yeah, I just don't think Dallas at this point in time is willing to commit that significant dollars to Seth Jones. As attractive as it would be to have Heiskanen on the left side and Jones on the right. The reason I went with Ristolainen is they've still got LTIR space from Miro Heiskanen, who may not return this regular season. So they've got that to spend. Ristolainen can help the right side of their defense. Not as much as Jones would, but obviously in a way different price point. And that's what's really separating Dallas, in my view, from being a true cup contender this year. Are they a good team? Have they played extremely well in 2025? Yes. They have a great goalie. They've got depth at forward. But the right side of that defense, adding Cody Ceci to it isn't enough. So I think they need another pump there. And they've already traded away a lot of their draft capital. They've traded away that first round pick. It was multiple picks and a third going to San Jose. And the big thing why I included Leon Bichelle there, who has first round pick pedigree, it was just a straight up deal. Ristolainen for Bichelle. And by the way, Ristolainen would join a team with 4 other prominent Finns that you could see him fitting in and blending in, and that big body. This would be another big body going the other way. Bichelle is 6'6". But I just don't see him. I don't see a path for him on the left side of their defense. They've got Heiskanen. They've got Esa Lindell, who they signed to a long-term extension. And then they've got Thomas Harley, who's now being brought in to join Team Canada in Boston. So that gives you an indication of the level that he's at. Those 3 guys, unless you're playing one of them on their offhand side, which is always possible, where does Leon Bichelle fit in to their future?
I agree with you 100%. And
the Flyers, you could that, you know why they'd want him, because he's way younger and fits and he's big and all those things.
Yeah. No, that one makes sense. If they can convince Chicago, to retain 2.5, and now Seth Jones is a $7 million player, even 2, and he's 7.5, then maybe the conversation comes. But I think Jim Nill is going to swing big here. I don't think he wants to waste this year, also with the LTR, but they got a really good team. And I think they're going to add a defenseman, whether it's as big as Jones, Ristolainen. Heck, maybe they go Connor Murphy, right? He's only got one more year at 4.1. So there are some right shot options for them for sure if they want to go.
That's what they need.
Yeah, 100%. Now, one guy you didn't have, Frank, who I think is going to get moved. He's having a pretty good year. He's got the 8th most points of UFA pending players in the NHL this year, playing in Buffalo. Jason Zucker, what do you make of his odds of getting moved? The Sabres, they retain whatever half. Now he's a 2.5 cap hit. Like, he's playing pretty well. He's on pace for a 25-goal season.
I don't have him on the board because the Sabres have said publicly that they want to re-sign him. So,
but do you think he wants to re-sign?
I would think if I'm Jason Zucker, I want to go to a place where I'm wanted. He's bounced around. He's been traded. That's what I would stick in a place that wants to have me.
Okay. So you think there's more likelihood of re-signing him than dealing him. The other name that's kind of interesting to me, that because it's not always the big names, and you and I have talked about this, trade deadline, some of the best deals aren't the biggest names. right? And I know you have McCarron. I've been talking about him for months. You have McCarron. If we look kind of down the roster of those depth D-men, Frank, is there another D-man that you thought about putting on your list that didn't make your top 6 that might not be big, sexy name, but could be a solid depth addition for a team?
I was trying to find a home for Ryan Lindgren from New York. I think Ranger fans are agitated with him. The turnovers are at times glaring, and all of that overlooks or masks the fact that you need guys like him to win. He's a warrior, and what he's put his body through in the playoffs for the New York Rangers, after those experiences and the fact that the Rangers didn't sign him to a longer term deal, I think the writing was kind of on the wall. And I was trying to find a place, but couldn't necessarily find the perfect fit. Like, again, not necessarily not a perfect fit, but what about Winnipeg? Like, I could see Winnipeg beefing up their defense a bit as well.
Yes, 100%. I think they have to.
But is Lindgren the guy? I don't know. But that was one of the teams and one of the players that I was thinking about in terms of trying to find a fit.
Well, it is fascinating when you look at how tight some of these teams are. Like, you could probably realistically say there's 5 teams battling for the 2 wildcard spots in the East. So 3 of them aren't going to make it. But, you know, most teams have 6 games between now and the trade deadline when we return. And depending on how you go, Frank, right? If all of a sudden you go 1-5 or 2-4, now you're 8-9 points out. Maybe you're like, oh, geez, suddenly on March 6th, now you're thinking on moving. And I'm like the Islanders, you know, the Rangers. I don't think Ottawa is selling in any realistic world. Detroit, I got to think might be looking to add. Like, there's a little bit of pressure there to just get in, you know. But I'm kind of curious. Calgary Flames, like, what if all of a sudden the Flames end up 10 points back of Vancouver? Do they consider Rasmus Andersson at all?
Nope.
Yeah, I don't think so. Right. But they got some other guys.
I just did a podcast. Go listen to Frankly Speaking. Craig Conroy addressed it again, not moving Rasmus Andersson.
No, I don't think it. Now, we got some news before we go, Frank. No Cale Makar. He's got an illness. He's not practicing today. I'm assuming he'll be ready tomorrow. They've got some line juggling in their bottom. Marchand is going to play with Bennett and Jarvis, and you'll have the all lightning line with Point.
That's a spicy line.
Point, Cirelli, and Hagel. Right. And like Braden Point, like, I really like Braden Point. And that could be a big mismatch for teams. You know, him and Hagel, like, I look at that Marchand Bennett line. I'm kind of curious who they play against, because I don't think you're going to play them against the Jack Eichel line.
I think that's yeah, that's exact. I think that's the reason they're put together. Bennett, Jarvis, and who is the center?
Bennett's the center with Marchand and Jarvis.
I'd put them toe to toe with the Tkachuks and Eichel.
Really? Okay.
Try and knock those guys off their game.
Yeah, like some shifts. I don't know if it'd be exclusive, but
not exclusive. I don't think it's going to be exclusive line matching. But I first off, I think it'd be great theater.
Oh well, yeah. Bennett and Marchand, the Tkachuks,
and Jarvis. I mean, Jarvis yaps all game.
Yeah. Hey, fun fact for you, Frank. The fastest Canadian player, the quickest burst, according to NHL Edge this season, who's on Team Canada and then on Team USA. Because I got an article coming up on all the speeds for all of them. But in the regular season, which Canadian do you think has the top speed, and which American do you think has the top speed?
Since we just talked about him recently, is it Jarvis?
It is Jarvis for Canada at 24 point.
McKinnon's got to be right behind him.
Well, there's Jarvis at 24.42, McDavid at 23.97, ironically enough, and then McKinnon's 23.83. But here's the surprise one. I would have given you 5 guesses, and I don't think you would have got it. Jacob Slavin at 24.19.
Wow. I definitely would not have gotten it.
No. Like, I literally refreshed it 3 times on the page. I'm like, is this right? Am I calculating this wrong? So now he doesn't have a ton of bursts. So it just must have been like this, you know, out of world.
Play, yeah.
Yeah, where he was going. But 24.19. It's funny that the 2 fastest guys, on each respective country both play for the Carolina Hurricanes. So just a little random note. But I've seen some talk about which team's quicker. So I decided to go into the numbers from top speed and then most burst. Because top speed, okay, if you do it once, great. But who's got a lot of the burst? No surprise, McKinnon leads the way significantly when it comes to burst. But, the other guy who's got some top-end speed, the fastest forward on Team USA, at least for one burst this year, Vincent Trocheck, 23.99 miles an hour, which is, half a mile an hour faster than Jack Eichel at 23.5. So that one caught me off guard a little bit too.
I'm just glad we had a break during Four Nations from the Jason Gregor schedule porn to get to speed porn.
Oh, dude, I don't know why you think schedule porn is such a big deal.
You just talk you love it. That's all.
Well, it matters, buddy. Back-to-backs and travel does take a factor, right? And you see it. I tell you, Frank, as a guy who likes to gamble, you gamble way more than me.
I don't.
Well, I don't gamble barely at all. So
that Super Bowl was the first sporting event I've bet on in 3 years.
No, okay. But guys who do, you look into that stuff because the numbers don't lie when it comes to travel and cross the country and different things like that for certain team. Third game in 4 nights is a big one. I should do it, but I don't know. I don't like gambling. So every night, I'd like to do it randomly where it's fun, but I don't want to do it too often. But schedule does matter. And that's why I think it becomes misleading for matchups until you get to the playoffs when travel is pretty much irrelevant because it's even for every team in the series, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who are you picking tomorrow night? Afternoon first.
Afternoon, I'm going to go Sweden 4-1 against Finland. And I'm going to go US 3-2 over Canada.
Oh, which could then shape up. So let's use your theory. Now, your Team USA, you've clinched a playoff spot. You can avoid Canada if Sweden beats you. Or
nope.
Do you even think about that? I don't, nope. But some people are like, oh, you could let them in. I'm like, yeah, but then you're giving them confidence. You're going to meet them again 3 days later.
You do not tempt the hockey gods because they'll get you every time.
I would agree. I think the Finns' best game of the tournament is coming tomorrow because that rivalry is massive for them. Like Canadians, Americans, we got a good rivalry. Swedes and Finns, man, it's just as intense. And
they can bring their best game all they want. They're playing with not a right foot. I know that's essentially what we're dealing with here.
But they will be. I think they lose by 1. I think it's a 3-2 game. I think they find a way to keep it close. But and then I'm not sure how much they'll have left for Monday against Canada, though. So we shall see. Frank, any good meals in Montreal you fellas have been to?
We've tucked away a couple Shen shows here in the press box.
Okay, how many hot dogs is your Remchuk eating? Like, guys, I know you guys are there and you're doing it right. You're doing your show in the Bell Center. So how many hot dogs have you two eaten so far?
So Ray Ferraro set the over under for me for the tournament at 10.5. I am through 2 games and I've had 4.
So you didn't eat. What about on? I guess, yeah, you don't practice there. Okay. So you've had 4, but you only have tomorrow. That's it. You're not going to eat 6 tomorrow because then you leave. Or is he including?
I told him take the under, but
yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. Like you walk downstairs from the press box and you have a 2-dog intermission and you never know where it takes you.
Well, because they are like the toasted buns for people who've never had one. The toasted buns are pretty good. And they're not that big, right? So you can. No,
they're skinny. You could put away 3 without blinking.
Yeah. Like old Chestnut could probably eat 50 in an intermission. Easily. Not even sweat.
Yeah. Jeff O'Neill's here too. So him and I might do some damage.
Oh, well, your Remchuk likes to bet on anything. Maybe you guys should do a head-to-head wager. Do it live on Instagram.
That would get some views.
Oh, I think competitive eating is the bane of our existence in 2025. I think it's the grossest thing ever, but it'd be funny to do it once because you got honestly, how many think you could eat before you'd want to puke?
Look, I'm ashamed to admit that I've gone to a Phillies game and done dollar dog night and gone dog per inning.
9.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
But you
And how
gotta
big are
go
the
like
dogs?
the new thing is going 9-9-9, 9 innings, 9 dogs, 9 beers.
And you've done that?
No, I don't. I mean, I just don't know where you'd put it. Like at some point, your stomach is just a gurgling mess.
Somebody sent us a note on Twitter to Frank and I at Frank Seravalli at Jason Gregor. Have you done the 999? Just let us know. I'd be curious. There's somebody out there can do it. There's no chance.
It's a thing. Search for it. People do it all the time.
999. All right, Frank. Well, maybe you'll try the 3-3-3. 3 periods, 3 beers, 3 hot dogs. I can do that, I think.
I might do that on Saturday for the first game. I don't have anything else to do.
All right. Well, good luck. And Joe, what a doubleheader day, man. Rivalry day. It's going to be awesome for fans of hockey to see the intensity on both games should be great. And you got the big one, Canada, US. And yeah, US definitely in the driver's position when the game starts because they've already got the 3 points. So it should be a great game. And man, I hope it lives up to the hype. I think it will.
I don't have any doubt that it will.
I'll enjoy it live. We'll talk to you next week.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you need to be hitting the subscribe button right here at Daily Faceoff. Exclusive interviews and analysis from our hockey insider Frank Seravalli, fantasy updates from Brock Sagan, and a daily live show at noon Eastern, Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss any of the fantastic content, so hit that subscribe button.